and welcome to an episode of The New Fly Fisher. My name is Jack Imhoff, and I'll be your host. Joining me is my good friend and co-host Colin McEwen. We'll be fishing out of Blue Fox Camp in beautiful Algoma country within the Lake Kirkpatrick area. Colin is here because 3 years ago, he had horrible weather and worked very hard just to catch a few fish. We're hoping this week will be different. The adventure starts now.
Ooh, that's a nice sized fish.
I will catch these all day.
That is what you're in for on this episode.
The New Fly Fisher is brought to you in partnership with Destination Ontario, Algoma Country, Orvis Fly Fishing, Scientific Anglers, Trout Unlimited, WeatherTech Canada.
Our adventure began after my long drive up from southern Ontario to meet with Colin McEwen at Timber Wolf Air Service, just north of Blind River, where we were able to take a float plane to the camp. The day was clear and cold with a brisk wind from the north. Windy, but still good for a short flight to the camp. The Algoma Highlands are one of the several high-elevation areas of northern Ontario, with a rugged landscape, high-elevation ponds, wetlands, lakes and rivers, an outdoor enthusiast's paradise. We were greeted upon our arrival by co-owner of the camp, Pete Roberts, and his dog, Roxy, and along with them, our guide, Dean Reinhardt. Blue Fox Camp sits on the south shore of Lake Kirkpatrick in the middle of the Blue Lakes area, north of Blind River, Ontario. The camp sits in the middle of the Algoma Highlands with its rugged topography and numerous lakes. This entire area is part of the headwaters of the Little White River and the Little White River Provincial Park Protected Area. Lake Kirkpatrick and the 8 feeder lakes that form part of the headwaters of the Little White River surround Blue Fox Camp and hold naturally reproducing lake trout, rainbow, and brook trout. This diversity of naturally reproducing trout is found in less than 1% of the lakes in Canada and has led to this exceptional area being included as a Lands for Life protected area and part of the Little White River Provincial Park. In addition to the populations of naturally reproducing trout in the 8 feeder lakes and main lake, the area is fortunate to be supplemented by a trophy-class brook trout stocking program. The stocking program occurs in the highland lakes surrounding the Blue Fox Lake system, and the program concentrates on a limited number of planted fish in formerly fishless higher elevation lakes. Limited numbers of small trout in each of these trophy lakes reduces the pressure on the food supply so that the stocked trout have ample opportunity to grow on their rich food supply. These brook trout can regularly reach trophy sizes within 4 to 5 years. The ability to fish for 3 species of wild trout and to have the opportunity to try to catch a real trophy brook trout in the special management lakes above the camp makes this an exceptional fishing destination. Morning arrived clear and cold with scudding clouds and a rising brisk wind that was blowing the early morning mist off the water. The night had been cold and the temperature was about 35 Fahrenheit. Forecasts suggested that it might hit the low 50s by afternoon. Speaking with Pete, we decided to first try one of the trophy lakes above the camp. This required an ATV ride up the rugged hills to a trailhead, then a 20-minute hike with our gear to the first lake and subsequent 2 portages into our trophy lake.
Today is day 1. We're at Blue Fox Camp and we just had a long set of portages into this beautiful lake. We're going to do some exploring and we're going to try different flies so we figure out which ones these big boys will like.
What we're going to do, we're not going to even, let's just get away from the shoreline here. And then we'll move the rods, we'll get the rod situated, and then I'll get the sonar on, okay?
Okay.
Colin suggested that we first do a recon by trolling and using the fish finder sonar to get a sense of the lake and where there was underwater structure, bait, and hopefully fish. When you start to fish a new lake, it's always good to do a bit of recon to examine the types of habitat both along the shore as well as in the middle of the lake itself. This is why a fish finder is so useful. It helps you focus and concentrate on likely areas where fish are most likely to be. Colin started with a full sinking line, and I started with an intermediate line so that we could explore different depths as we trolled. Both of us were using small, dark streamers. We used a transect approach, crisscrossing the lake to get a sense of its habitat, where there were shoals, drop-offs, or humps in the lake, and to see if we can mark bait fish and hopefully trout.
All right, Jack, we're in the money hole. This is an area where Pete had told me there was deeper water, and he suspected that the large fish will be in here.
Okay.
And we're going to troll around with these intermediate lines. I've got the sonar here.
Okay.
We're in 17 feet of water, but we'll do some searching and see if we can find the bait fish, or we can find, because obviously they'll be around them.
Yep.
Or just find where they're hanging. They might be near bottom or they might be suspended. We're in that transition period in terms of the lake. Hasn't flipped yet. So the warmer water is still up top and the cooler water is down below.
As we moved along, we noted the fish appeared to be a bit deep, so I switched over to a full sinking line, like Colin.
All right, Jack, so you're all set up now. You've moved to a full sinking line. That's what, a type 3 full sink?
Type 3.
And you've got all the line out to basically the backing, and then taking a couple rolls on it,
Right.
or spins, and you're twitching that woolly bugger along, hopefully near the bottom. I'm going relatively slow. I think I'm going like half a mile an hour.
Perfect.
Right? And we're in 30 feet and we're spotting fish on this hump. Surrounded by 18, 20 feet on the one side, 30 on the other, but it's 12 to 16 on the hump, and that's where the fish seem to be marking, and we're seeing bait fish. So I think we're in the zone now.
We're in the zone.
Now let's just see if we can find one that'll spot that fly, and if not, then we'll go to suspended. Okay, what have I got here? I got bait fish. I don't think it's a fish. I got a bait fish as we're coming up the slope at 22.
Perfect.
So basically what we're doing, and this is true of all lakes, you know, you're going to have 10 or 20% of the lake will hold the fish, and the rest of it's going to be basically devoid of the big boys and girls. So what we're doing is we've eliminated water. We've gone and done our little circuit, and now we're coming up the slope. We found a hump, and this is no different than walleye fishing or lake trout fishing. They all like structure like a hump where they can orient themselves and then wait for bait fish, or they move from this hump into the shoreline and cruise the edge looking for food.
We're basically high grading the optimum habitat.
As we continued to delineate the key locations of humps and bait fish, Colin suggested it was time to change our tactics and try fishing the depth and locations where we had marked bait fish and potentially trout. We switched to floating lines with very long leaders and strike indicators and used balanced flies. Floating rigs with indicators allow you to fish at the depth where the fish are suspended. However, the challenge is being able to hold your position over these areas if there's a strong wind. made especially challenging in a canoe, even with anchors fore and aft. After an hour or so of working the hump and trying to maintain our position, we decided to switch back to sinking lines and to work the other areas where we had marked fish. As we were switching to sinking lines, I noticed a small splash of a feeding fish just off an old bankside beaver lodge.
Fish or Bob?
It's a fish. Fish on. Now that talk about lucky, eh? So just putting my line out. Now just getting ready to paddle, and all of a sudden, bang! Using a little egg-sucking leech pattern. Woo! Okay. Yep.
All right.
After that amazing fish, we decided to continue to troll near the shore, close to the beaver lodge, and also fish drop-offs where we had marked other fish. Day was getting on, and there was a nice mix of sun and cloud, but no more hits. We had another lake that Pete suggested that we try, so we decided to pack up, portage back to our second portage point, and head out onto the other lake. The water clarity in this lake was much better than our first lake. That previous lake had the typical brown staining of many northern lakes, but this new lake perhaps had less wetland influence and more groundwater input, and therefore was much clearer. Pete had suggested that we try the back basin of the lake and look for a rocky point, sharp drop-off near weed beds. We found the location and thought we would start by working the point for a bit. There was no love casting to the point in adjacent weed bed, so Colin and I decided to do some recon and slowly troll all around the margins of the lake as we had done in the first lake. We noted really good shelves and drop-offs along the shoreline in many locations. These shelves contained great weed beds that were often adjacent to rocky points or shoals. In these locations, the depths went from about 8 feet to a sharp drop-off to about 30 to 40 feet in depth. These areas appeared to be ideal for fish who wanted both security of depth but close to a great foraging area. However, the sun was getting low and we thought it was time to go. So we began to head out to a shallow inlet between the back part of this lake and the main lake. Colin glanced over the edge of the canoe and spotted 2 brook trout in 8 feet of water.
Jack and I were just about to go through this narrows here and reposition. And as we came in, I don't know, it's 6 feet. What do we see? 2 big brook trout cruising. So I'm gonna go backwards here. And Jack, I want you to cast very shortly back over here, because I got a feeling they were trying to get through the narrows. Get him, go! You got him! Oh, you had him! He was on. Strip. He's got it! You got him! I told you we'd get him. How cool is that? Sight fishing, there's 4 of them that time. Cruising the edge. So where can you go and sight fish for big brook trout like this?
I don't know.
The water's so clear here, we can see down 8-10 feet even though it's late in the day. And we're seeing them coming up on this edge. It's 6 feet against the edge, going up into 2. It's all weed. And I just saw a tail. And oh, that's a big fish. It's a big fish, Jack. I got him. Okay. And he missed the first hit. I saw the fish turn and eat it. All right, let's let him go.
It was absolutely amazing casting to visible fish in such clear water. Well, given that we now saw fish, how could we leave? Colin quickly stripped out line to see if there were other fish in the area. He was working his fly very slowly back over the weed bed when he had a good hookup
Got him. Got him. Oh, he's off.
But a sudden break.
Oh, no.
Not to be deterred, he put on another fly and cast out again.
Gonna take us up and around again? Oh, something just hit my fly.
Uh-oh, hey John.
So that was kind of cool. We saw that fish jump behind us, and we thought it was the fish that I broke off, and maybe it was, I don't know. Uh-oh. Houston, we have a problem. There we go. And anyways, I flicked it over there to wait while we were looking along the edge here. We're basically sight fishing these brook trout. And I got this guy.
Oh, Nelly.
Oh, wow.
That's a piece of weed.
It's a piece of weed, okay. You ready? I think I can get his head up. He's got the weed in this, oh. Woo-hoo. So this fish is only about 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds, which I know people out there are saying, hey, Colin, that's a big brook trout. I know it's a big brook trout, but we're on the hunt for 4 to 7, 8 pounders. I'm not disappointed. I'm very thrilled. And I'm gonna let this guy go, Jack. You wanna hold us right here? Look at that beautiful brook trout. How cool is that? We're basically sight fishing, Jack. End of the day, we're going in for dinner here in a few minutes, and how about you? I can't leave. I can't leave. I didn't hook that fish sight fishing, but you know something? It's still okay. I saw my line jet, and I went, I've got a fish. How cool is that? I mean, this is so much fun.
As Colin mentioned, we just couldn't leave without a few more casts. Dinner would have to wait. And we were not disappointed. Colin hooked another fish. It was a great way to end the day, both of us with very nice fish, and to top it off, sight fishing for big brook trout. It doesn't get any better than that. But it was finally time to call it a day and look forward to the next day. The next morning arrived with a mix of fog, sun, and clouds with warmer temperatures than our first morning. Humidity was rising, but the day was still supposed to be cool in the low 60s. Weather for the day was forecast to be stable in the morning, but likely to cloud over with a chance of rain later in the day.
Good morning. It's day 2 at Blue Fox Camp. Yesterday, Colin and I had a good day. We did mostly reconnaissance, and we determined that where the fish were and where the fish were not. We also determined where the fish were active and where they were not. So today we're going to be fishing edges and drop-offs in structure because that's where the taking fish were.
We were still looking for a brook trout that would top 6 to 8 pounds. They were in that first lake. If the winds calmed down, we hoped to try the floating rigs again to get down to where we had marked them. We worked our way back up the trailhead and headed in right after breakfast. With the warmer temperatures and higher humidity, it was a sweaty hike. Once at the lake, we rigged our rods, and Colin and I straightened our leaders for the day ahead. We had decided the night before that we would work the shoreline with small woolly buggers and/or leech patterns to see if we could find feeding fish as we made our way to the main part of the lake.
Should be a good day, one way or the other. Cherchez le trout.
Colin navigated and pointed out likely spots to try. As we worked our way to the main part of the lake, we saw water beetles skimming the surface in big schools, obviously feeding on emerging midges. This suggested that we might want to consider going to indicator rigs with midge patterns later in the morning. Meanwhile, we continued to work the shore. Colin and I made certain to cover likely habitats for feeding fish, such as sunken logs, rapid drop-offs, rocky points, and boulders, submerged in the water.
So we're just coming into this lake, and we're talking about where to fish, and we saw a tail splash up here, and we think this is the hump that we identified yesterday. There's some brook trout here that are chasing probably midges or something up to the surface and eating them. That's why we saw the tail splash. So we're using our intermediate lines with sinking flies, and hopefully we'll see it again and we'll get these flies down, but we're not holding very well here.
We continued to drift and cast and twitch our flies slowly back to see if we could entice these feeding trout or if we needed to change our tactics. When casting and then working streamers back, you want to keep your rod tip close to the water surface or under it to reduce slack and allow you to feel the strike of the fish more effectively. The drift and cast tactic with streamers and sinking and intermediate lines was not working, and Colin and I decided to switch to floating lines and indicators so that we could suspend our flies at the depth where the trout appeared to be holding. We set up our floating rigs and cast them out to let the movement of the wind and small waves create action on the flies below. This is a patience game as you slowly retrieve or twitch the line to provide movement to the fly suspended below. It was a real challenge holding the canoe in one spot over that underwater hump. It didn't help that the wind began to come up and the weather appeared to be changing once more and rain appeared to be on its way. We toughed it out for a while longer but decided perhaps it was time to hit the other, more productive lake before the rain hit. We headed back to where we had caught fish the day before and decided to try that rocky point and drop-off adjacent to the large weed bed again. Colin kept his indicator rig set up from the previous lake and made a couple of casts while I sorted out my rod.
Whoa. How you doing, man? Oh, that's a decent fish, is right. Oh, beautiful colors. Good for you. Almost. No, but as soon as I saw him go under the boat, I thought, no way. Can you bring him forward?
Oof. Well, we just got in position in this beautiful, beautiful brook trout. We just cast. Hey, Jack?
That was the second cast.
And I'll tell you what, I'm gonna release this fish.
Okay, yeah.
Because it is, when I show it to you, I'll show it to you quick. Look at that. Look at the colors on that fish. Ugh. Now let him go.
There he goes. That
Not
was
huge. What, 2 pounds?
That's more like 3, man.
Okay.
More like 3 pounds.
I'll do the conservative too, but anyways, I'm using a little balanced leech under an indicator, and it was about 4 feet down. And what we were thinking is that they're going to be cruising the weed edge, this point, all along here, right, Jack? And in the time we've been sitting here, we just had a fish come up and hit on the surface. So, Jack, I wonder if maybe you should go to a topwater fly. I'll stay with the indicator, and let's just see if they'll come up and eat a topwater fly.
Sounds like a plan, man.
Okay, let me get you one out.
Taking Colin's advice, I switched to a large dry to see if the fish were interested in a surface bug, while Colin kept on his indicator rig, given that it had been a successful tactic. Meanwhile, a few fish continued to roll around us. However, after a half hour or so, it appeared they were not interested. So, it was time to switch again. You always need to be flexible with your tactics since the fish can change behavior on a dime. Being sensitive to their moods can make or break a day of fishing.
Here, fish. Yeah. Let this one sink a little bit more on this floating line. So, made some changes. Went to a floating line long leader, and I put on a vampire leech with a bright red head, and that's what you recommended. Now let it sink down a bit, and then slow little strips, 3 inches, 4 inches. Ooh. And Sunday saw the line go straight. Well,
Yeah, couldn't get his head. I wasn't going to go by tail.
wait.
Who says that brook trout don't fight well?
You can get the head up. There we go. Beautiful, beautiful fish.
The weather was slowly deteriorating as we fished the back bay, and a light rain began to fall. Colin and I decided to switch to intermediate lines and try vampire leeches to see if the tactics from yesterday would work today.
Fish on. So I was casting just back into this pocket where we had seen some fish rising before. Just let it settle down, and then I started tightening up in short, sharp twitches, and voila! Oh, whoa! He wants to go to the ocean, so to speak. If I can ram around. Yeah.
Okay, just slowly bring him over this way.
Yeah, I'm
Jack.
going to. I'm working my way towards it.
So you got him in the right spot. There you go.
Wow! Woohoo!
That's a big, thick fish. It's not that long, but it's really thick.
That was amazing.
See it?
Oh, there it is. Okay. There. Here you go, buddy. Thank you very much. Well, it was a good plan, a good strategy to switch lakes. We went through a few portages and came to this other lake. Right away, Colin hooked a fish on a float with a suspended pattern, and we switched over, and then we went over to intermediate lines and caught a few more fish. All was good, but action slowed down. Rain's come on a bit, and it looks like it's quieting down for the night. Okay. Good.
Time for dinner and adult beverage.
Shit. Or
this one.
Or this one. I spoke too soon.
I got one.
Well, I guess we spoke too soon. This is gonna be a pain.
Oh, look at all the fish here. You see them on your polarized glass?
Yeah.
I see 6 fish. I guess out here. Double header. Nice way to end the day. That's a beautiful fish.
Yeah, they're all beautiful. Some are just more beautiful than others.
Yeah.
Oh Jesus, man! You got them?
Do now.
Woo!
Okay.
Okay.
Your fly's out.
Flies out.
Yeah.
Get the tail first.
Look at that slab.
Look at that slab. Isn't that gorgeous? Okay, here you go, buddy. We got another one to catch.
Heads up.
Whoa!
A little wet?
A little bit wet. Happy wet.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Pass
Yep.
it over. Better.
Yep. Okay, all right. It's beautiful fish. Colors. Well, that was awesome. And you know something, Jack? Time for an adult beverage. Pack up our gear.
Yep.
Couple portages. You made a great recommendation to change lakes, and you know something? You saved the day. Had a great day.
Thanks, Colin. And I think you're right. It's time for an adult beverage. It's another great morning here at Blue Fox Camp. The weather has socked in a little bit. It's a bit rainy and misty out, so we thought we'd mix things up a little bit and try the big lake for a change. So we're going after brookies and rainbow. Let's see how we do.
Fishing new lakes and ponds can be a real challenge. However, understanding what the fish are looking for from a shelter and feeding perspective can improve your chances of catching fish. Fish are always mindful of predators and tend to prefer to reside in or close to deeper water where they can escape from those predators. At the same time, they also need to eat and therefore seek out areas where food can be found. These can include locations that concentrate bait fish and bugs such as fallen timber, weed beds, drop-offs, and bouldery margins. If these areas are also close to shelter habitat, they are golden. One major habitat feature can be created by beavers. Beaver lodges and their food stash provide amazing habitat for bait fish, bugs, and of course ambush habitat for larger fish.
So we just left the camp. We're just slowly trolling along the shoreline here and then moving out towards a buried esker. We are doing a little bit of recon. We're just trying to figure out exactly where the fish might be. The esker is fairly shallow. The lake in front of me is deep and drops off to a great depth. And the shallow is out behind us, so what we're trying to do is run this edge here and do a bit of recon to figure out where the fish are stacked. And once we find them, we'll start casting to them.
So we've marked a whole bunch of bait fish, and they're spread out from a high of 10 down to 30 feet. But what I don't like is that they're in long lines. There's a loon around here that's trying to find them, but I'm not seeing any hooks around the bait fish, and the fact that they're spread out as long as 10 feet in length in long strips, that tells me that they're not being hunted. They're not balled up. What I'm looking for is when they're balled, because that's usually a sign that there's predators around after them.
However, we decided to cast towards the location where we had marked bait with our intermediate lines and streamers to see if we could rouse a trout. After a while, we decided that we should continue down the lake and troll along a trough that ran close to the southwest shore of the lake. This long section of shoreline looked very fishy, with large boulders in the shallows dropping from 4 to 6 feet to a deep channel at 20 to 30 feet.
So we're just going down the shoreline here. We're heading towards the Narrows. And I marked what I thought was some debris, and I hooked something. Don't know what it is, but we'll find out in a second. Put this up here. There it is. Now it's kicking into gear. Taking some line off. I took this white streamer. You know something, Jack? That might be a lake trout. That's a brook trout. I think it's a brookie. I see the edges. It's a brook trout. And it was digging down like a... Okay, I'm gonna bring him up. It's a wild brook trout. There we go. How cool is that? I'm gonna have to bring this in here. Fly's already out of the fish. And you see it right here. Let me get the fly out of the way. It took that fly. But look at that beautiful wild brook trout. Isn't it beautiful? Okay, so let me get him in the water right away. That's a nice, beautiful, I'd say it's about 14 inches. You just guide him out. There he goes. Beautiful. Now that we found some fish, Jack and I, you can see the winds come up a bit down the channel here. I'm gonna go back up where we marked the fish. There was nothing visible structure-wise We're not seeing any food, but they're obviously cruising around. So we'll go up above and we'll start casting streamers and see if we get some more.
We motored back up the shoreline to a small point past where Colin had hooked his fish and started to drift and cast.
So what Jack and I are doing is trying to find this school of brook trout. I marked and hooked one, and we've got the motor running, and we're drifting down the edge here. Got a good distance from the shore. He's using an intermediate fly line with a streamer, and I'm using a full sink line, type 3, and short leaders, 6 foot, with 2X on them, and we're just smacking them down and stripping these streamers and looking for the brook trout or the rainbows that are cruising the edge of this part of the lake. It's a bit of work. We got a good drift. I have to have the motor running right now just because I'm afraid we get pushed in. But this is how you find them at this time of year, because they're scattered, they're usually schooled up, and they're out hunting. But it's a nice overcast day. It's greasy, it's gross, it's a little bit cold, but it's perfect. It's actually perfect for this type of fishing. Got one.
You stop that!
Oh, it's off. Fledge. That felt decent, that fish.
Literally, you just chucked it out.
I know. We got lucky there. Let me try again.
We were hopeful that we had found a nice pot of trout and continued to slowly drift down the shoreline, probing the near shore with our streamer flies. We fished along the same shore for a bit and then decided to head to the west end of Lake Kirkpatrick to try a narrows that Pete mentioned could be good.
So we're in an interesting part of this lake, which was a bit to get into, but where we are now, it's gone from 2 feet to, well, we're in 6 right now, and we're fishing along the edge of this fallen timber, and evidently it gets to 15 feet deep. We're looking for the brook trout and the rainbows here. And we're gonna try and drift it and keep the motor going only because I gotta keep us away from the shore. We'll see how we drift, and let's see if we can find some trout that are cruising around. I'm really excited about this. We're using, I got a full sink on right now, but I'm gonna be doing a fast retrieve, and Jack's got an intermediate. He's gonna be doing a slower retrieve, and we're both using white smelt patterns, and the goal here is to see if we can move a fish. Evidently they've had good success down here, and it's basically river fishing is what we're doing. Even though it's attached to the lake, it's the river that flows out of this lake.
I'm gonna cast parallel to the shore, parallel to that log.
We were drifting down the narrows and saw a fish splash ahead of us near the left bank.
Got fish on. So I was casting the Scotty McFly parallel to the shore. We noticed that there was a fish had risen close by, and sure enough, there was a trout there, a little brookie. Oh, and he came off. Look at that, but he was there. So 12, 13 inches, yeah, nice little fella, and he hammered the Scotty McFly.
We moved out of the narrows into the western basin and began to fish the shoreline, looking for an underwater ridge that Pete had mentioned. The weather remained greasy and cold, perfect for fishing. Colin decided to control the boat and move us slowly along the shoreline while I cast towards shore.
So Colin and I are working the shoreline here. There's depth behind us, and then it tapers off and shallows up with a lot of logs along the side. So I'm trying to imitate a minnow that's kind of confused, so I'm doing short, sharp strips in order to give some livelihood to the fly and to make it look like it's an unhappy minnow that's been injured or wounded and it's looking to escape somebody. And nothing turns a predator on than something that looks like easy prey.
We gave the western basin a bit more time as we worked the shoreline and rocky shoals, but no luv. We decided to head back up and try the first place that we had fished that morning closer to the camp. We gave the area another go with a drift, casting towards the shore. At least the rain had stopped and the ceiling had risen. With some small fish rising, it was worth a fly change and a try again.
Going to a larger streamer. Scotty McFly, popular smelt pattern.
So there's little trout rising around us. Who knows if the bigger boys are around with them as well.
It's got to be the bait fish they're here for.
Yep, they're going after bait fish. So maybe the tap I had earlier was one of the small guys, but you never know.
Could be.
Despite our best efforts, the fish were victorious that day, and we decided to head back to camp to warm up, have a hot drink, and a great dinner. There's always tomorrow. After a great night's sleep, we woke up again to an overcast and glowering day. The wind was from the north, and there was a threat of heavy rain later in the day. We decided, after a bit of a late start, to head up to the upper lakes again. Perhaps the unsettled weather would start to move the big trout. It's another great day here at Blue Fox Camp. We decided after a wonderful day yesterday to come back up here to these smaller lakes and see if we can find some of those jumbo brook trout that we found a few days ago. We decided to try the second lake that had been more productive earlier in the week. We rigged up our rods and then hopped into the canoe to head down to the first basin of the lake that we had not fished before. We thought we would hit this before we tried the back basin again. We were using intermediate lines and vampire leeches, working around a small island adjacent to a good drop-off. We moved no fish in that first basin, so decided to head back down to the far basin through the shallow, narrow inlet to an area where we had had luck earlier in the week. The back basin had excellent habitat for trout. Deep water was adjacent to shallow shelves, going from 6 to 8 feet in depth to over 30 in a short distance. The shallows had very productive looking weed beds that likely harbored a variety of bugs and small bait fish. The inlet from the other basin, along with the north wind blowing, could bring food into this back basin and also provide a great place for trout to forage. The rocky points also provided ambush habitat in the form of large boulders adjacent to deep water. We did a couple of transects of the lake, but decided to go back to fishing the shoreline by casting towards the rocky point adjacent to the weed beds.
We're gonna kind of go this way and work this edge. Well, and that's something. I'm gonna hold this. Wow. First cast against a weed edge. Jack and I tried another part of this lake, had no success. And we saw a splash over here. And then I cast out first cast, and this fish came up and ate it before it even sank. I saw the line go straight. All right, I'm gonna bring him into you head first.
Okay.
It's not a giant one, but it's a nice size. And a nice way to start the day, Jack.
Yep.
Look at the colors.
I'm just waiting for that head to turn.
All right.
There it goes. Look at those colors. Oh my gosh.
There we go, flies out. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna take him, my hands some more. Oh, look at that. Beautiful, beautiful brook trout. There he goes. Trophy anywhere, and here, a small brook trout. Small brook trout. Is that incredible or what? All right, Jack, It's your turn.
My turn.
After the release of that very nice brook trout, we continued to work the edge of the weed bed looking for another interested fish.
Just in towards those weeds. They must be going in and out of those weeds, eh, Jack?
Yep.
Well, that's the thing. Once we eliminate the empty water, we get it down to that 10 to 20% of the lake where the fish are concentrated, usually due to food.
Yep.
Then I'm not going to say it's simple, but it makes it easier. We know we're casting the fish. The rest is up to us.
Yep, exactly.
Now, Jack, I just saw what I just told you about right there. So between the two of us, I just saw some nervous water.
Okay.
Which is basically a fish that just came up following or chasing something it was going to eat.
Yep.
Could be a water boatman. I've seen a few of those. It could be minnows. I'm not sure, but.
Okay. What do you think? Fly change?
Oh yeah.
Or go out into the calm water and fish on.
Oh, well.
Well, we were slowly stripping back. I was slowly stripping back and we were talking about changing my fly to a different pattern and voila.
So it works, Jack.
So I was stripping very, very slowly. My goodness, this guy is strong. I'm just gonna try to put him on my reel. Oops. I have a bit of a challenge here. Oh, buddy. Come on, buddy. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Whoa. Let's loosen up the drag. Oh, there he goes. Loosening up the drag just in case, and it was a little bit too late. I saw he was hooked in the top of the mouth, so that was what was worrying me. I was worried that he'd unhook himself, and he did.
Oh well.
Well, that
Barbless
was a
hooks.
mighty fine fish, and barbless hooks have their merit, but they also have their challenges.
After losing my fish, we kept our hopes up and continued to work the weed beds where we had caught most of our fish a few days before. The leech patterns were not moving fish, and Colin suggested changing flies.
What I think is happening with our vampire leeches is they're grabbing the tail. They're not eating the whole fly, they're just grabbing the tail. So one of the ways we can fix this is by going either to a smaller vampire leech or try a smaller fly. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put on a 2-fly rig for Jack, who's right now putting on a new piece of leader. He discovered he's got a couple wind knots, which obviously is impossible given his great casting skill. But I'm going to put on these 2-fly rig where I'm going to have a weighted water boatman as the lead fly, and then about 18 inches behind it I'll put a floating one, and with the intermediate line and the size of that fly, he's going to give it little 1 to 2 inch pulls. So a slower presentation, smaller fly. This might be what we need to seal the deal and catch some of these reluctant brook trout.
With the new rig on, we continued to fish and work the margins, hoping to move those reluctant fish. The weather began to deteriorate, and dark, heavy clouds were rolling in, and the wind was picking up. If we wanted to fish the other lake, we thought now was the time to head over there.
Well, we've just spent the last hour and a half looking for fish. We've tried different techniques, but nothing seems to be working. If you can see behind me, there's a fund coming in, so we think the fish have gone down for a bit. So I think we're going to move to another lake, have a little bit of a bite to eat on the way, and then we'll try over there. Who knows?
We got off the lake just as a thunderstorm rolled in. We portaged to the trophy lake, but waited for the storm to subside, and then waited until a half hour had passed with no lightning and thunder. The rain and storm passed, and we headed out onto the trophy lake to see if our luck would change before the weather became worse. We noticed that in the lull after the storm, the water beetles were very active, capturing emerging midges. This spurred us to go to floating rigs and suspended midge pupae over the hump where we had marked fish earlier in the week. Flipping the rigs out, we twitched and occasionally did a slow retrieve to see if we could entice the fish, which appeared to be resting down deep beside the underwater hump. Luck was not with us. Another storm appeared to be building and coming towards us along with strong, gusty north winds. And then the next wave of cold rain hit and got heavier and heavier and heavier. With the rain gods against us and the fish showing no love, we decided it might be time to head back to camp. The next morning dawned overcast with strong, blustery winds, a temperature of about 45 Fahrenheit, and intermittent rain and mist. The front that was coming in the previous night was still building, and the weather highly unstable. Today was another day to try the big lake. Pete had suggested that we try the eastern portion of the main lake east of the camp. He had given us a map showing the area and the streams flowing in. We thought we would start where a stream entered the lake from one of the upper feeder lakes.
We're on the big lake today. We've had a couple of fronts come through yesterday with heavy rain, steady north wind. So we decided this is a perfect day to be on the big lake fishing for rainbow trout. Wish us luck.
However, the unsettled weather and changes in barometric pressure could also affect the fish and put them down. Big lakes pose a special problem for anglers. There appears to be so much water, but where do you start? You can hedge your bets by finding good habitat adjacent to deep water. This includes looking for areas with rapid drop-offs and boulder fields close to deep water where fish can move out of deeper areas into shallows where there's food. In all lakes, but especially in big lakes, windward shores can be an area where wave action stirs up the bottom, attracting bait fish and therefore attracting game fish. Casting was just too difficult with the heavy wind and the heavy chop on the water. Colin was doing a great job holding the boat, but the winds and the chop were just too fierce. We decided to troll along the shore with sinking lines and bait fish style streamers, such as the Scotty McFly.
Freezing my ass off. It's really cold. The wind shifted from north to northeast. Blustery, gusting. Marking some fish, but nobody's playing. We're trolling it, going up and down this channel. But I'm feeling pretty confident that soon I will be sitting beside a nice hot stove with a fire in it, holding a nice warm beverage.
We just have to let those fish have a little rest before we get back at them. Right now, they are showing no love.
After an hour or so of searching for fish, Colin and I decided to call it a day. We headed back for a warm beverage and to check the weather for the next day, sort out our flies, and plan for our last day of fishing at Blue Fox Camp. Over the 6 days that we fished at Blue Fox Camp, we used a variety of flies, lines, and tactics. The rods we used were Orvis Helios 9-foot 6-weight rods with matching Orvis Hydros reels. For our trolling and exploring, we used intermediate or fast-sinking lines with short 6-foot leaders tapered to 8-pound test. For our indicator rigs, we switched spools to floating lines. The flies used for trolling were flies such as one of our favorites, the Scotty McFly, or woolly buggers. When casting to likely areas along the shore, we varied the lines and flies used. Most often, we cast intermediate lines, or in the case of fishing a dry fly, we used floating lines. The best producers of the trip were vampire leech patterns, with either a yellow or red head, and with either a black or purple-black body, with flash. Colin did catch one fish on a crystal hair minnow pattern as well. We occasionally used a 2-fly rig with a beadhead streamer and a trailer with a floating streamer. This is not the first time that Colin or I have been to Blue Fox Camp. The facilities for a remote lodge are excellent, and the range of exceptional fishing opportunities is wide. I had a chance to sit down with co-owner Pete Roberts to discuss the camp, its beginnings, amenities, and the variety of fishing that surround it.
My friends and I, my three friends, Brad, Mike, and Dan, decided to buy this camp in 2015 because it had become part of our DNA. We've all been up here between 20 and 30 years as a group. And when the opportunity presented itself in 2015, there was very little hesitation to buy this place. So we jumped on it as soon as we could. In terms of accommodations, we offer two different styles, which I think is pretty similar to most camps that you would see. We are a fly-in or an ATV, and we can't get full-size trucks in. The road doesn't permit it, but we are a fly-in or ATV. And we have two different models, which is the American plan, only offered at our main camp, and that's obviously your meals, your lodging, your linens, and the other is an outpost model. Our two smaller camps down the lake are an outpost, a housekeeping model, and you bring all your own linens, you bring all your own food. For any of your viewers that are watching this right now and they want to get a hold of us, I'd recommend going to bluefoxcamp.com, which is our website, and on there you'll find a ton of information, like our daily rates. It'll give you a description on our three different camps, where we're located, some information on the history of the camp and what our philosophies are. There's a lot of information on that website that'll help you plan your trip out before you even pick up a phone.
Our last fishing day at Blue Fox Camp dawned bright, cool, and calm. The weather of the last several days was finally settling down. We headed back up to the portages and worked our way to the trophy lake, which to that point had only given up one good fish of the trip.
Well, it's our last day here at Blue Fox Camp. The weather's been kind of rough over the last few days. We've had some fronts come through, heavy rain last night, but everything is stabilized today. It's going to be brisk and cool, around 49 to 52 Fahrenheit, but the weather is stable, so our hope today is to try to finally find some of those big brook trout that reside in these lakes. Wish us luck.
Once rigged up, we decided to troll over to the area where we had marked fish earlier in the week.
I take it we're going right to the beaver dam.
We worked near the shoreline, close to the beaver lodge, where I had hooked my one and only big fish in this lake. Then, carried on along the margins and along the drop-offs.
Said fish are here. They're down deep, 20, 25 feet. We're hoping we can dredge them up with fast sinking fly lines and very, very slow drift.
After an hour or so, we decided to return to the portage and try the more productive lake one more time.
Well, we've decided to try another lake. We were on a lake earlier this morning. Wind was cold, overcast. Fish we marked were very, very deep and very sluggish. So we decided to come try this other lake. Water here is clear. Hopefully a little bit of sun will warm them up a bit.
Over the several days that we fished this lake, we found that casting to the weedy or boulder margins close to drop-offs paid off. So we began by casting and drifting, fishing the weedy margins. We continued to work along the edges where we had hooked fish earlier in the week, but no go. We then decided to move to the windward shore on the far side of the lake in the hopes that the wind and waves were stirring up food that may be where the fish might be feeding. I was trying to cast tight to the shore in case the fish were right in the shallows after bugs and bait fish. While fishing really tight to shore, I had a hit. Now that was encouraging.
It felt like a hit. It could have been a branch, but it sort of felt like a hit. Where are you? Fish on.
All right. And that was not that deep, Jack.
Nope, they were shallow. I'm just trying
Good job.
So I was casting right underneath that tree, right to the very edge in shallow water, and just starting to pull it off. I'd had a bump earlier, and it looks like that's where they were.
So I think this works out well. I paddle backwards against the wind, or we're going forwards.
Yep.
And you're casting 45 degrees either ahead or behind.
And then that shallow water, just like Pete said.
Yeah. They'll come up into the shallows hunting. And then when you pull your fly over the deep edge, which is that 6 to 8 feet, because I think I was in 10 to 15 feet.
Yeah.
That's what we're finding them. Well, it's beautiful brook trout.
They are beautiful fish. And strong.
Well done, Jack. That was a nice fish.
Whoa. Well, we sure had to work for that fish. The condition has been variable, beautiful sun, but heavy cloud. Fish were not showing, but we started to work the edge, and bingo, there they were.
We worked the shoreline, casting towards fallen timber, boulders, and weed beds as the sun warmed the day. We continued to work the east shore of the lake and began to move towards the small bay near the inlet, where we had had most of our good luck over the trip. Colin and I once more started to systematically work the weed bed as we had the last few days, hoping that the sun was making the fish more active.
Fish. That fish was deep. Deep pocket. It's gonna get us out here a bit. So you cast into the 6 foot mark.
Right.
And I cast out into like 15 and was stripping it back when he hit. But I had to let that line really go down. Okay, so one of the first things is getting it off your leg. There we go.
Oh, good. He's pulling us out to deeper water. That's a good thing.
Trying to keep tight, so we got barbless hooks on. And it's very easy to lose these fish if you give them any slack. Making a 6 weight really bend. Well, that was a nice fish.
That was an amazing fish.
You think, Jack, another one?
I think we should try for another one.
After that great fish, we continued to work the bay and margins for another hour or so as the sun began to get low on the horizon. However, the fish appeared to settle once more, though the weather was finally stable and the sun was warming our faces. We thought perhaps it was time to call it quits. These exceptional waters that surround Blue Fox Camp had not disappointed us. Colin had his revenge on the brook trout of the area, but this time, unlike the last time, the rainbow trout eluded him and me. But that's fishing, and why we always want to come back to great places such as Blue Fox Camp.
The weather today has been quite interesting. We started off with it cold and dark with a strong cold wind. It's now lightened up, nice and fresh with the beautiful blue sky. Caught a few fish in the afternoon, but the fish have been sluggish and a bit slow. The front is slowly building up, so the next few days will likely be really, really good. Unfortunately, we're heading off tomorrow. So I want to thank the folks at Blue Fox Camp, owners and staff, for an amazing time, and look forward to seeing all of you on the water sometime. Check us out at thenewflyfisher.com. See you soon.
The New Fly Fisher is brought to you in partnership with Destination Ontario, Algoma Country, Orvis Fly Fishing, Scientific Anglers, Trout Unlimited, WeatherTech Canada,